So for quite some time now, the Marines have had their own combat fitness test, but now the Army has a combat fitness test, the ACFT, and I was kind of curious, how do they stack up to each other? What's up my friends, welcome to an all new video. In this one we are doing a comparison of the Army combat fitness test to the Marine combat fitness test and how do they stack up, what are some pros and cons, and what is different about the two different combat fitness tests. Now if you are not already a part of the Chaos Army, maybe think about hitting that subscribe button, also maybe click that bell so you get alerts as soon as new videos go live, to include the live streams and become a part of the notification platoon. So let's talk about what the difference is between the Army combat fitness test and the Marine combat fitness test. So the Army has their combat fitness test and the Marines have their combat fitness test. Now I've done several videos already on the Army combat fitness test. So if you want to know more about the Army combat fitness test, I'm going to leave some links down in the description to several different videos that I've done explaining different parts of it, what it involves, what the standards are, all that kind of stuff. So I'm not going to reiterate that stuff here. Check that stuff out if you're not already familiar with the combat fitness test for the Army side. Now I am going to give you a little bit of a breakdown for the Marine side that are at least familiar with it as we kind of break down the comparison between the two. So let me start off with doing a little bit of an explanation of the Marine combat fitness test and the three events that make up that test. That test starts off with an 880-yard run or a half-mile sprint kind of thing that they do. That is then followed up by a 30-pound ammo can that starts from shoulder height, and you have to raise it above your head as many times as possible. And then concludes with a maneuver under fire event that has like the sprint, you have to drag a buddy, you have to low crawl, high crawl, do some push-ups. There's all sorts of events that are involved with this maneuver under fire event. So now that you're a little bit familiar now with what the Marines do and what the Army does as far as their combat fitness test, let's get into the kind of breakdown of comparing the two different combat fitness tests and how they're different, how they may be somewhat similar, how one might be easier, one might be harder, whatever kind of comes out of this. And that is starting off with the uniform. What uniform does each individual have to wear when conducting this combat fitness test? So on the Army side, it's just your normal physical fitness uniform. You have the shirt, you have the shorts, you have some running shoes. If it's winter months, you might be wearing a jacket and some pants. So it is a comfortable attire to have to wear while doing these physical fitness events. Now on the Marine side, they actually have to wear the Marine uniform. So they're wearing the pants, they are wearing the green t-shirt that's worn as an undershirt under the blouse, and also the blouse. There are some circumstances where they are able to downgrade the top or the blouse, and that event such as like the ammo can lift, because they want to be able to see that they're locking out their elbows when they're lifting up the ammo can. They can choose to downgrade it if the commanders allow that during the that first little sprint, that half-mile run that they have to do, but they must wear it during that maneuver under fire event. So during the maneuver under fire event, they have to wear the blouse and everything. But they're also, key thing is that they're wearing boots compared to the Army wearing tennis shoes. So it is probably a little more uncomfortable, having to wear boots and try to do all these different events. I like that side of the Marine combat fitness test of having the combat uniform compared to the physical fitness uniform for the combat fitness test. Now, on the Army side, it wouldn't work too well for all of the events. It worked for probably most of them, probably 5 of the 6 events, but it wouldn't be a very good kind of evaluation during the 2-mile run because, you'd probably end up with some ankle injuries or something like that trying to run 2 miles in boots. And the key thing is that 2-mile run is not to make sure that a soldier is combat ready to be able to run 2 miles in a combat zone. No, it's testing their endurance, and you want to test their endurance under ideal conditions. So you're probably not going to be in a lot of situations in a combat zone where you need to run for 2 miles. You're probably doing bursts of running and stuff like that, which is why you have like the sprint, drag, carry and certain other events, but you don't want to try to test that in boots. That's also why on the Marine side, when you do the 3-mile run on the physical fitness test, not the combat fitness test, and we'll kind of talk about those two as well, but they do that in tennis shoes as well. But when it comes to the combat fitness side, the Marines are in that full uniform with boots and everything and having to do that half-mile run, the ammo can, and that maneuver under fire event. Now let's kind of compare the different events that are involved with the combat fitness test, but I feel like you have to kind of still put into consideration that the Marines do two different tests. They do the physical fitness test and the combat fitness test. They don't do them at the same time. They do maybe the physical fitness test at one point in the year, and then maybe like 5 or 6 months later do the combat fitness test. So they're spreading it out. So they do have 6 events, but those 6 events are kind of spread out. You do 3 events here, 3 events there, 3 events in a physical fitness type uniform, 3 events in the combat uniform basically, whereas the Army is doing all 6 events in one. They're replacing the physical fitness test with the Army combat fitness test, and so now they do all 6 events at one time. But I feel it's unfair to only evaluate the 2 based on the Army's 6 events compared to the Marines' 3 events of the combat fitness test. You have to put at least a little bit of consideration into that the Marines are also doing a physical fitness test earlier in the year at some point. So they have different events. There are a couple events that are very similar, some that work similar muscle groups. I think because the Army is doing all 6 events at one time, that does make it more of a challenge. You're gonna be definitely more fatigued, more tired after doing 6 events compared to 3 events, even if those, 3 events are spread out. You have 3 events, one point of the year and 3 events later part of the year on the Marine side, but on the combat fitness side of it, 6 events, and then the Marines do 3. So as far as what each individuals are doing at the exact same time, well, you're gonna be more tired after doing 6 events compared to on the Marine side for the combat fitness test only doing 3. Now, there are some events that are very similar. For example, you both have a run. You have on the Marine side, on the PFT side, they are doing a 3-mile run, or on the Army side, they're doing a 2-mile run, but they are doing those 2 miles after they've already done all 5 of those events. On the Marine side, they're doing that 3-mile run after doing the pull-ups and after doing your crunches. So you're not gonna be as fatigued. Yes, it's an extra mile the Marines have to do, but the Army, you got 5 events you have to do. You're gonna be pretty fatigued before getting to that 2-mile run. Now, as far as just looking at the CFT side, that part of it, you definitely have a much higher kind of, challenge on the Army side. You have more events you have to do compared to the Marines. You have, you're sure that ammo can is not easy to probably do. That maneuver under fire is not easy to do. And that sprint they have to do for half a mile is not easy to do either. But when you look at the 2, you have a lot more work to do on the Army side. So now let's look at a comparison of the standards for what it takes for an Army soldier to pass compared to a Marine on this CFT. Each branch has a very different kind of set standards that they have involved with it. One of the big noticeable things is that the Army side is age and gender neutral. That means it does not matter if you are male, if you're female, if you're 18, if you're 40 years old, it is the same set standard. That is not to be said on the Marine side. On the Marine side, it does matter. It does matter if you're male or if you're female, if you're 18 or if you're 40, as the standards do change based on your age. That becomes a big factor when it comes to a matter of an individual passing on the Army side compared to an individual passing on the Marine side. On the Army side, there are just 3 set standards based on kind of the requirement for that job, for that MOS, for that unit, for that soldier, as far as how high in demand it is for physical requirements to establish what the minimum passing is for those individuals. Where on the Marine side, it matters as far as if you're male or female, 18 or 40, as the requirements do get lower. So if you are an 18-year-old, you might have a higher set standard to be able to pass that CFT, whereas if you're maybe 40 years old and a female, it's definitely a lot lower. Now on the Marine side, they do say that exceeding the standard is the standard. So the minimum standard that the Marines set for the CFT is not something you can just simply get away with and pass the thing. You have to do above that. I don't know what the threshold above that is. I have heard that if you did the bare minimum on all 3 events, you fail. So you need to exceed the standards. But still, those standards are lower based on if you're older, if you're a female compared to a male. So that does definitely fluctuate. That was one thing I remember I hated in the Army. I hated that, you had to do this many push-ups to pass, where a female could only have to do this many push-ups in order to pass. So I remember that was a big discrepancy between a lot of soldiers. It still probably is kind of a thing, but now with this ACFT, it kind of eliminates that, as you have, pretty much that set of standards. The only thing to maybe gripe about is if you're an infantry unit compared to someone who's in maybe like a finance unit or something like that, then yes, they have a lower, set standard as far as the passing requirements kind of go, but it doesn't matter if, male or female, and your age doesn't matter. Also, a nice thing on the Army side is the max standards are the same across the board. So if with this scoring system of 600 being the max that you can score, if say someone scores a 500, well, that 500 score is the same across the board for everybody. Where with the old standard, you know, of being 300 was the max, if you scored like a 250 and you're 18 years old, that might have been harder to accomplish compared to someone who was, you know, female and 18 years old. Or even sometimes with the age, it would get a little bit harder to max, but then it kind of started to go down a little bit. But it was still a different requirement compared to if you're male or female or 18 or 40 years old, whatever, even though your score was the same, it was still a different standard to get to that score. Whereas with ACFT on the Army side, it doesn't matter. It's the same max standard, whether you're male, female, 18 or 40. The Marine side is more like how the Army side was for the physical fitness test. So it does fluctuate based on your age. There is some point in time where as you get older, it does actually get harder to max, but still a max score of someone who is a male or female isn't really kind of the same kind of thing. It's still gonna be different. What that male had to do compared to what that female had to do is gonna be different, where Army side, it's not different. Now, with the current system that the Army has compared to the Marines have for the scoring system of the CFT, I do feel like for an individual, let's say just neutral, right? An individual who's not in the Army or the Marines, if they were to take both of those tests, it probably would be easier for them to pass the Army combat fitness test compared to the Marine combat fitness test. But that is with the consideration of this individual being something like 18 years old, 19 years old, something like that, like a young individual. Now, if you take an individual, let's say that's 50 or 40 years old, they are gonna probably have a harder time passing the Army one and an easier time passing the Marine one, as the Marines do lower the standard based on your age. So it would be harder, you know, for an older individual to pass the Army one, but harder for a younger person to pass the Marine one, I feel like. Now, in my opinion, I think that the new Army combat fitness test is a better kind of test of a soldier's endurance abilities to be able to perform in a combat type of environment. I do like on the Marine side that they do it in, you know, the full-on uniform, right? It's not the full battle rattle of wearing the vest and helmet, but it is a lot closer, obviously, than the Army side. But the intention, I guess, isn't necessarily to simulate combat, but to test the physical abilities of that individual to be able to perform in a combat environment. So I like the Army combat fitness test. Some people may disagree with that, but I feel it is a good test. Now, comparing it to the Marine one, I feel it's better, especially because it's age and gender neutral, because of the 6 events all at once, a lot of, you know, several other factors. But again, that's just my opinion, and that's how I feel about the ACFT when you're comparing it to the Marines combat fitness test. So that is my opinion on the different combat fitness tests for both the Army and the Marines, but I would love to hear your opinion, whether you are Army or Marines or Air Force or Navy, or even we'll include you National Guard individuals too. What is your thoughts on the different combat fitness tests? Which ones do you feel is maybe a better test of the combat efficiency of an individual, either the Army side or the Marine side, or do you feel like they're both pretty darn good? So leave your comments down in the comment section down below. Now, if any of my viewers out there are either Army or Marines, I'd definitely like to hear your thoughts. I'm sure that, you know, you're gonna be a little biased to Army or Marines, especially Marines are very gung-ho about their branch of service. So I understand if you feel that the Marine one is tougher than the Army one. That's fair, it's legit, right? So I would like to hear your comments down below as well. What do you like or don't like maybe about the Army combat fitness test or the Marine combat fitness test? Whichever one, I would love to hear your thoughts in the comment section as well. So if you enjoyed this video, make sure you show it a little bit of love by hitting that thumbs up, even maybe think about sharing the video. Down in the description, I got some links to some of those other videos I talked about, as well as social media and much more. So check out the description down below as well. I'm Christopher Chaos. Thank you so much for watching. I'll see you next time. See ya.